it's not only everybody watching that it came out of nowhere too. It was the rest of the Big 12. I mean, that's the feeling that I've gotten from talking to other decision makers within that conference is they were blindsided by this. I mean, it was only a week or so ago that they were on a call together talking about how a 12-team playoff could potentially benefit their league. And, had you asked some of these people earlier in the week about possible dissension within the league, and they would have said you're crazy, right? And now we're sitting here with this. So yes, I was surprised, but I think that people within the Big 12 were also taken aback by it.
Now, what's the likelihood of this actually happening? And if it does happen, what does that mean for the conference as a whole? Can they survive without their two bell cows, as Feinbaum said?
So that's exactly what they are trying to figure out. They had this video conference last night, and the one thing coming out of it was we have questions and we need answers. Oklahoma and Texas were not on that call. That's important, right? They didn't give a reason. They haven't made any comments to the media. And the next step now is for those other 8 schools to find out answers from Oklahoma and Texas about how serious they are, because they don't know right now. So they sort of scratched the surface in that video conference as far as talks about what do we do if they actually do leave, and things like that. The one thing they made clear was that if Oklahoma and Texas do leave, they've got to abide by the Big 12 bylaws, which, as Fitz mentioned, 18 months notice and $76 million for each of them, which I'm sure they would fight in court. And then you've got to also consider that they've got the grant of rights deal, right? And they want them to abide by those TV contracts. So, how far down the tracks is it? The rest of the Big 12 doesn't even know the answer to that.
Do we know why? A simple question, but why do they want to go to the SEC?
The easy answer is money. But I talked to people who were on that call who said, we don't know their motivation. That's another question that they have. And if it is money, one person said to me, well, let's find a way to get them more money. We can divide it. What are they going to the SEC for? Is it $7 to $10 million? Is that what it's going to be at the end of the day? If it is, let's find a way to share our revenue distribution so they get more money. There are flagship schools. We get it, whatever. Is there a way that we can figure this out?
So realistically, Texas A&M spoke out and said pretty passionately they want to be the only team from Texas in the SEC. If this happens, is there movement for Texas A&M?
Wow, I would be surprised. I haven't heard that. I mean, what I should say? I should say nothing surprises me anymore, but I think they're very happy. They are crushing it in recruiting in the state of Texas. I think that that's part of the problem is that A&M is out recruiting Texas. So, I don't expect them to move, but if Texas and Oklahoma do join the SEC, it is a domino effect of what would happen throughout the rest of the college landscape.
Heather, stick with domino effect for a second because, it's hard for me not to put if this, then that, right? Like playoff expansion became a conversation recently, and now all of a sudden maybe winning a conference isn't as important. How much does the conversation around at-large bids for playoff expansion allow for more teams to look at joining a super conference if necessary because they have a clear path to the playoff even if they don't win their conference?
Well, that's the thing, and that's a concern from other leagues if Oklahoma and Texas were to join the SEC, because if you go 9-2 or 10-2 or 9-3 in that league, you're probably getting in, right? So other people are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, do we want a seven SEC teams in a 12-team playoff? No, I'm not going to sign off on that. So as we sit here in a summer of feasibility exploration as to can this 12-team playoff actually happen, you throw this monkey wrench into it, and that would certainly change people's opinions. Right now, before this news broke, there's a lot of support for it. People were excited about it. And now when you consider that factor into the equation, some people are pumping the brakes saying, wait a minute, I'm not so sure about that. And so, if they were to do that, some people have said a 4-team super conference with 16-team leagues, right? Well, what happens to the Big 12? And that was part of their conversation, like I said, scratching the surface. Do they go after BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, other schools that showed interest the last time these conversations and explorations started? And if so, what happens to all of those other conferences that aren't in the 4 super conferences? So a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. We don't even know if this is going to happen, but it certainly would impact the playoff.
Do you feel like, stick there for 1 second, Heather, do you feel like other conferences, I'll use the Pac-12 as an example, are now going to have to be aggressive about putting feelers out to make sure that they have the opportunity to rise if we're looking at that as a realistic possibility in the future?
Oh, I promise you that every other decision maker in the sport of college football is watching this like a hawk, because if it does happen, they have to be prepared, and it's going to be survival of the fittest, and there's going to be a mad scramble, right? So every other power player is trying to figure out, okay, if this happens, what's my next move? And I wouldn't be surprised if the ACC is involved in conversations at some point, if the Pac-12 is involved in conversations with Oklahoma and Texas. We continue to focus on the SEC, and rightfully so, because that's the story, and that's where the conversations were made informally. But hold on a minute, is everybody else still out of the picture? I think there are a lot of other directions that this has the potential to go. But yes, everyone is watching this and knows that they have to be ready if something happens.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.